Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Obituary, Season 1, Episode 2. Another great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. It's interesting how things end up having this domino effect in Elvira's life that she wasn't really counting on. Like, the fact is that she was so adamant about killing Tommy, but it all works out in the end because you have all these threads tying together, because we had that robbery story that Huey tells Emerson at the beginning of the episode, and that ties into Ward's story because he's at the bank when it's getting robbed, and the guy was going to kill him if it wasn't for Tom. So it's like, if she had killed Tom when she wanted to, things might have played out this exact way and Ward might have died. It's like, you never know how the dominoes are going to fall. So it's like, right, it's like she was certain about killing him because he's a douche and he deserves to die in her mind, but it's like, yeah, now I can't kill you now. But it's funny because she didn't let that death she had said, because she had already like put up the rope and everything, but he ended up getting distracted and something else came up, so she couldn't kill him then like she wanted to, but she definitely utilized that. So I'll go ahead and talk about it. But I love the reveal about the Veronica situation. I didn't even need the full reveal at the end. I knew she was the one who took the money the moment that like when Elvira was like confronting her about like, oh, the letter hadn't shown up, like I dropped it off like a couple of days ago or whatever, and the moment like she was like gluing stuff and like she had a bill there and she immediately hid it, I was like, the bitch took the money. I was like, wow. I mean, luckily there's nothing in the letter that's incriminating, but it's like, I mean, I don't even know if she actually read the letter. That'd be kind of an issue if she did it, but maybe it kind of be a moot point now. But I mean, once again, there's nothing that ties it to Elvira that she set the whole thing up, but still, it's like, man, I was like, that's wild. Especially because she's kind of mean too, because she was up there disparaging Ward like earlier in the episode about him basically taking money out. It's like, oh, you should, actually do something. You should get a job or whatever. And he's rather spending the money on the ponies, the horses. So he has a sure bet, and that's kind of been a running thing for him the entire episode. It's like, oh, I've got this sure bet. And the sad thing is he can't even like cash out on it because he ends up giving it to Patsy, because it's like, well, to be fair, Patsy kept bugging him about the money, and it's like, oh, I owe you a $5. And he's like, I need it back. And it's like, okay, well, you give me a $5, I'll give you a $10 in return, consider it interest. And then it's like, all right, and gave him a $5 later on, and it's like, all right. He's like, wait, where's the $10? It's like, no, I'll get you soon enough. It's like, Jesus, he swindled you. Cause we don't know how much, because the bet was like 40-1. So, and he put like 50 on it. Like, I don't know enough about gambling to know like what that translates money wise, but it's definitely way more than what Ward had gotten from Patsy. And it's like, oh, it sucks. Because him at the time, he was dealing with the aftermath of the robbery, so he didn't really have an opportunity. He didn't say, right, I'm kind of busy with this, Patsy, just leave me alone about the damn money. Here, I was like, you shouldn't have given it to him. You should have just, I guess it's like, right, yeah. To be fair, the bank kind of got shut down, because you probably would have been able to get the money from Veronica just now, like, because she's the teller and everything. You would have been able to get the money from her. That would have satisfied him. But because she literally, in the middle of a freaking robbery, decides just to pull the blind down and walk away. I also knew Mal was going to take advantage of that, because she kept staring at the phones, and it's like this robber's whole shtick is putting up balloons to cover up the camera. And I was like, is she going to steal the phone? Yep, she hijacks the phone. I was like, yeah, I saw that coming. It's like, well, you're taking advantage of the circumstances. It's so interesting that, I guess that's like a makeshift bank of sorts then, because if she's like the teller, I guess it's like the equivalency of having like an ATM in a store. It's so interesting because it looks like it's legitimately like a phone store. I mean, maybe it's one of those shops that's kind of like an amalgamation of everything. It's like, oh, maybe it's a phone store while also being like the bank, which I thought was so interesting. I mean, maybe Veronica isn't the bank. I'd assume she was. I mean, because obviously she was getting robbed, but I mean, maybe it's just ignorance on my part, because like I don't know how things are like set up in Ireland, so like maybe that's just kind of like the way that store is structured. Maybe that's just like, that's a normal thing. Like I said, I just thought that was so interesting. I mean, it's so interesting because things aren't going necessarily the way Elvira wanted this entire episode. It's just like things just kept not working out. First and foremost, she's not able to be with Emerson, even though she really, really likes him. And so, but you know, that's her and Mal, and she doesn't want to get in the middle of that. I think it's just a situation of, it's like, obviously Mal, but it's like, I guess she doesn't want to admit, she felt weird admitting that she liked Emerson. So it's like, she could have made that clear. Mal probably would have backed away, but it's also, once again, she's the one that kind of set Mal on that path, because she was telling, you know, her and Mal had that whole conversation about her sugar daddy situation. So it ended up kind of playing out because, well, it's like, well, she ended up, it's been a long time in between this episode and me recording the last episode. It's actually been over a month. But I'm trying to remember. It's like, because she forgot to switch the medication, so the guy ended up dying anyway, because she forgot to switch him, to give him his actual pills back, so he ended up still having an epileptic episode. Ended up dying because she had never swapped the pills back, even though she didn't end up going through with her plan. So it's like the sugar daddy's been removed from the situation. But I think Mal and Emerson got together before she killed him, right? Or was that after? I'm pretty sure that was before. So, you know, but she had already kind of walked away from him because of Elvira. So it is a situation of, well, because of that, now it's like her and Emerson are together. So she was kind of her own undoing in so many ways in this episode, and I think that's going to be how the story unfolds, is she ends up being her worst enemy just because the domino effects she kind of sets in motion have come back to kind of bite her. But I love that this episode mainly revolves around her being pissed about a letter. Someone basically wrote a letter talking shit about the obituary she writes. It was by a concerned citizen, and she can't let it go. Mal's telling her to let it go and everything. Her dad knows her well enough to be like, oh, you need to find this person. There's enough clues in this, like the way they've written stuff, yada, 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 that could point you towards them. I love that her dad's just as petty, because I think it's like, no one's going to talk shit about my girl and her honest day's work. So, you know, I think that's the father in him being like, no, find this person. But even Mal was like, yeah, let it go. They've kind of got a reputation, because like Mal, like, hey, it's like, I've never let stuff bother me. You got a 62 on like a test or whatever, you lost your shit. Me, I got less than that, I didn't care. But anyone that ran their mouth off, I stuck up for you. But the problem is, it ended up gaining both of us certain nicknames that still follow us. But yeah, I love that she initially picks the wrong person, because she ended up, her dad pointed her in the right direction. I thought that was so interesting, because he was like, oh yeah, check like the box room, and it's so interesting he pointed her in the right direction, but he knew, like, right, whoever, it's a small enough town that I guess most people stopped by when her mom died and signed that book. And so she was going through it, and she was looking at the way it was written, and she thought she found the person, but the person that she thought it wasn't that person, because that person's like paraplegic now. So it's like, cool, you kind of busted in here accusing this person, wasn't them. So she ended up looking back. It's like, not how it was written, but what was written should be what's focused on. And ended up finding a Dostoevsky. I'm going to butcher it. I cannot say the name to save my life. Dostoevsky. That's the best I can do it. There's just some names and some words I slur and stutter and stammer on. That's one. I'm not going to attempt it again. That's all right. I could keep going until I got it. I'm not. I'm keeping it in there. It was god awful attempt to try and say that. Yes. But yeah, found the quote, and she associates it with Peggy, and then we find out Peggy's not that nice of a person, which I'm like, is Peggy really that bad? I mean, yeah, she kind of seems like an asshole, but does she deserve to die? I mean, it's like, no, it's more so your pettiness being like, no, she's talking shit, but you needed confirmation. You found out the letter, like, you found the same paper in her house. You also followed her. Apparently she's got hiccups that kind of, apparently supposed to stem from something with her weak heart or whatever. But yeah, she also yammers on about abortion being murder, and also she never tipped Tony at the soup place. It takes her like an hour to eat it because of the hiccups and everything. Then we find out there's a kid, Bill, who actually does her groceries for her, and she learns from her dad, like, oh, no, that kid doesn't do it out of the goodness of his heart. He broke her window, and his mom doesn't work, and she can't pay for the window, so Peggy's such a dick that which, I mean, once again, I guess it's a little dickish. I mean, it feels like you'd see that in a classic, like, it feels like that'd be like an old school thing, but I am coming at that from like an American perspective. Once again, and I'm basing that on like old school. It feels like that's an old school neighbor movie TV show thing. I mean, maybe that's a thing that would happen in real life. It'd be kind of the equivalency of community service to some extent, I guess. But I don't think it's that bad. Once again, kind of an asshole, sure. I mean, I think that's what this all comes down to, of like, oh, these are asshole people. Elvira needs to get her like kills on anyway, so it's like, hey, why don't I remove people from the board who are assholes? But it's like, once again, I think that's also supposed to be the dark comedy of it. It's like, dude, are these people like atrocious human beings? That's where it's supposed to be like that dark humor, almost Dexter-esque, because I definitely remember referencing Dexter last time. But yeah, like, at least the people Dexter go after are monsters. These people are like, yeah, they're assholes. But that's why I'm like, that's not that bad, but it's still kind of like, it's still kind of shitty forcing someone to do that because their parent can't afford to replace it. Like I said, from a different perspective, you'd be like, it feels like someone would be like, no, that's okay. I mean, who knows, like, how long he's had to do it, but that was just enough for Elvira to be like, all right, cool. And that lets her go like, oh, I'm going to manipulate this situation. So she ends up forging Peggy's letter and writes it to Bill, and it's like, basically, hey, I need you to scare me, and because she has a weak heart, basically make her have a heart attack and die. That was kind of the main plan, but in a way Elvira had envisioned it. She hadn't really said this in a letter, but it was like, hey, you scared me. Peggy falls down the stairs and dies. So that's how it's supposed to go. And I love that she like was envisioning going into the office. Then Huey's like, Peggy's obituary, oh, amazing. And then Emerson looking at her muttering, I love you. And I'm like, she's like, yeah, a girl can dream. And just as she's delivering the letter, she runs into Peggy. I was like, I was like, oh, that's interesting how that works. And then the moment that happens, she hears screaming. Turns out Peggy just collapsed and died. I was like, wow, the universe just spit in your face. You literally just set everything in motion to have her killed, which is also shitty on you to use Bill as your murder weapon, but still, once again, you gotta make it all look like an accident. But man, not only did she talk shit about you and your machinations, you came up with this great way to kill her, and you don't even get to utilize it, and you also don't get the thrill of killing her. In fact, you try to save her life just so she lived long enough for you to kill her. I actually thought the ironic thing would be that she was going to live. I thought like, oh, she'd be fine, but maybe after everything was all said and done, I don't know how this was all going to work, but I thought something was going to happen where like her ticker, her heart was going to be better, so the scare tactic wasn't going to kill her. I mean, granted, once again, if she falls down the stairs, I still would probably do her in, but it's like, nope, she's dead. So I was like, wow, you didn't even get, you don't even get the thrill of her being dead because you needed to kill her yourself. And it's like, which is so interesting too, because you're indirectly killing her and yet you're getting the, but you're still killing her. So it's interesting that the Grim Reaper came for her first. It's like, despite all your machinations and stuff like that, death just comes and it kind of like screws up your plans. Funny enough. And we also found out she doesn't even get to write Peggy's obituary because Huey's like, yeah, she was not the biggest fan of yours. And it's like, yeah, I found that out recently. So that must mean Huey must have known immediately who she, like, he must have like been like getting a lot from Peggy. Like, oh, like, because it's like, how did you, because she's only recently finding out, but Peggy's probably had an issue with her for a while, but Huey's just probably kept that to himself because I don't want it to get to your head. But it's like the letter still found its way to her. So, but anyway, Huey's going to be the one writing the obituary, and it's like, right, and because she didn't write the obituary, because it's not her work, she's not getting paid for the situation, even though it's out of her control. So it's like, cool. So it's just like one thing after another, like, wow, this episode really screwed you over in that regard, which is kind of effed up considering all the, like, murder stuff to get. It's like, it's that weird thing of like, oh, should we really be feeling bad for Elvira that she didn't get to kill people the way she wants to, and that she doesn't get basically paid to do it, because obviously she's writing the obituaries where she gets paid for the obituaries she writes about people that she killed that no one else knows that she's killed. So, it's like, should we really be feeling bad for Elvira? So It's so interesting too because she had that conversation earlier with her dad where she was like, "Oh yeah, like am I a good person?" And later on he said, "Am I a good father?" She's like, "Well, you had me, so doesn't that give you an answer?" And he had this look on his face where he paused. I was like, "What the hell was that about?" And I feel like that might tie into the Emerson stuff, which I'll circle back to, but specifically the Maria stuff, it feels like it might be leaning into that. But like I'll finish up what I'm on right now and then circle back to that. So, but yeah, like I said, it all worked out because she ends up eventually finding out about Veronica, and that leads to her being able to kind of get her kill in the long run. So it all works out in the end. Well, not really, but we'll get to that later on too. The problem is, though, that it is a great obituary she wrote for Veronica because she tries to humanize Veronica. It's like, yeah, everyone knows about her being like the person who stole money. Apparently, and like over, what was it, like over the, was it in grand total over the years that she's stolen basically a grand total of 20 grand from the city as a whole. And it's like, because it was like probably like a little bit at a time over the years, little stuff goes missing here and there. She probably never took too much at a time because if she did, that's when people would have noticed. But what I thought was so interesting, Huey didn't really buy the suicide, which I'm like, interesting. I was like, Huey's about to become an issue because he's probably going to be the one that starts piecing stuff together because of that. Maybe, I don't know. It definitely feels like Huey's, it's like, it's definitely crossed Elvira's mind because she in the first episode, write, and she does the obituary thing where she looks at someone and she kind of writes it out, it's kind of written as text on the screen. I'm like, didn't she do that for Huey last episode? So she's thought about it, but it's like, yeah, kind of don't eat, don't shit where you eat type of situation. So I'm sure there's kind of that, and you probably have to you'd have to wait for someone else to fill that role, and it's like at least Huey's someone you can deal with. Who knows who get, probably because someone else in the office would get the job, or they bring someone else in, or someone else would eventually get, someone from the office would get the job, and they're probably more of a pain to deal with than Huey. Which feels like that could still be the end result. Like Huey could probably be dead by the end of the season, and someone else comes to fill that role. Maybe I was about to say it'd be interesting if somehow. I think if Elvira would maybe try to aim for it, I don't know if she'd actually get like his position, because he's like considered like editor-in-chief of the newspaper, isn't he? And more of things not fully working out for her, despite some things working out for her, was the whole thing with Emerson, because he ended up kind of looking for that good story, all right? Because once again, that conversation at the beginning of the episode between him and Huey about a good story, it's like, right, don't tell a story that people can just look out the windows and see. It's like, oh, the council, there's so much nepotism involved, or sewage and not being properly disposed of when it comes to like out of like the water supply and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, who cares about that? You need something kind of interesting and sexy. And he told the story from like a neighboring town or whatever about the robbery, which that ended up folding into this story because the robber showed up in town and stuff. Which even he was like, what's up with this town full of weirdos? Which is the exact term that Ward used to describe the people in town. But it's like, yeah, Veronica didn't budge and then rolled down the thing. And then obviously it's like, hey, like even Ward kind of nudging him, being like, oh, like, and the guy's like, what, you want me to pop her or something? He's like, oh no, that'd be, more work for my daughter or whatever, him joking like that. But it's like, I mean, he had no love for Veronica either way, so, but it's like, yeah, town is kind of full of weirdos, because like, once again, you even saw Mal, like, taking the opportunity to steal the phone and bouncing, so. Because truth be told, it's like, everyone was super chillaxed under those circumstances. Everyone was kind of like, yeah, it is what it is. And like, no one was like freaking out or scared. It's just like, yeah, everyone took it with stride. I mean, even the guy was like, I'm a robber, not a murderer, until he got pissed at Ward and put the gun in his mouth. So, but either way, like I said, Emerson was looking for a good story, so he ends up learning from Elvira about the about Veronica. He confronts Veronica, brings that to Rose, and it's like, cool, this money's been stolen underneath your nose and the town's nose, and if they find out about it, they'll be pissed at you for not doing your job. So, little pro quo, you end up helping me get the file on like a certain file on Maria. I'll give you this person. But by the time Rose showed up, she was already Veronica was dead. Also, did Elvira glue her mouth shut? Because didn't it seem like she was screaming with her mouth shut? I mean, it's like, yeah, you have to have her, I guess, like have her conscience to make it like really like seem like she was squirming, because you don't want to kill her beforehand and then make it look like a suicide. Like, no, you set up the suicide ahead of time. But it looked like she was screaming with her mouth closed. I was like, did she glue her mouth shut? I mean, it's like, right, you don't want to have her screaming at the top of her lungs, drawing in a lot of people's attention. So, but either way, Emerson seemed pretty bummed about the whole situation. And it was kind of interesting, Elvira's perspective on it, where she was like, oh, there's kind of a bit of freedom in death, because, you know, people said like, oh, they're in a better place, or they're somewhere else now. But she's like, later on you'll find out there was so much pain, and that death ended up kind of being a release from that pain, which, I mean, it's an interesting perspective Elvira's kind of got on it. Kind of makes sense why she would, considering what her job is, and also her own fascination with death and stuff, and just her relationship with death in general. But what really got Emerson wasn't really about the Veronica necessarily. It's more so like, yeah, the best thing he's ever written came about because of this. So it's like someone else's misfortune, and you kind of profiting off of it. It made him kind of happy, which Elvira really liked, because it's like, hey, we're kind of two peas in a pod. Granted, she also knows like that doesn't mean we can share everything, because I can't let him know about my personal proclivities of how I get my jollies off and stuff like that. But I think she felt closer to Emerson in that moment. It's like, don't worry, I won't tell anyone. Not even Mal. It's like, no, I already told Mal. What'd she say? She told me to talk to you. It's like, cool. I mean, it's like, yeah, your best friend knew that you'd be the person he could talk to about stuff, but she was almost hoping like this was going to be their thing. It's like, oh, this is something you and me share, and not you and Mal. Oh, you shared it with Mal, and Mal actually pointed you towards me. And it's kind of just another little extra gut punch from Mal. When she actually took Mal out there to that cliff where she puffed Sandy, I was like, you're not trying to kill her, are you? But then she left, and I was like, oh, so I guess you weren't. I mean, I know she's your best friend, so you never think about it, but this Emerson thing makes it kind of feel like there's going to be a point where Mal ends up crossing a line, and you end up, like, wanting or needing to kill her. I don't know. Which ultimately ties into, like, oh, like, things are falling apart even further for Elvira, because as she's waiting, she gets visited by someone, and it's a teenager who's like, yeah, I'm here all the time, and he saw what she did to Sandy, and it's like, right, we're going to get better acquainted. I'm like, I wonder if we're going to find out, is he a young psycho? Either he's going to try and blackmail her for this situation, or he's kind of a psycho himself, and he actually wants to be involved, kind of like, it's a weird reference to make. If you've ever seen the movie Mr. Brooks, feels like it's going to be kind of something similar to Mr. Brooks. The movie's like over a decade old. It's like kind of 14, 15 years old at this point in time. But basically, Kevin Costner plays a dude who's secretly a serial killer. And this guy finds out about it and wants to kind of shadow under it. And the guy's played by Dane Cook. So I'm wondering if they're going to have a similar thing here, but Elvira's going to ultimately have to kill the kid, or maybe she actually grows to kind of like him. It ends up being someone she could share this with, because she has no one she could share it with. But it's also like, like I said, that's me being, which is weird to say, optimistic. I think it's probably more like going to be a blackmail situation. We'll see. We'll have to wait to see the next episode to find out what that's all about. Oh yeah, I actually forgot about covering. Well, there's one thing I was going to circle back to regardless, but there's one thing I forgot. It was the whole situation with Peggy when she went to kind of, I want to get a fuller story on Peggy. So she goes to talk to Bill and his mom, and Bill's like, she's a bitch, and it's like, oh yeah, Bill didn't talk about that until you start like having to like basically be around her a lot more. And in fact, his mom was actually going to spill some tea on why she's such a terrible person, but we never got that, which I'm like, oh, that's a bummer. I want to actually know why but it's like, no, we're not even going to get that, because they won't talk a bad word about her now, because everything was actually left to Bill. So you're like, oh, his house and like her insurance policy was all like left in his name, and I'm like, oh wow, so she actually kind of did something nice. That's where I go back to where I was saying, like, yeah, it's kind of an asshole thing, but it also feels like it was kind of like that life lesson thing of like, oh, I'm trying to teach you responsibility, and I'm having you get my groceries, and I mean, it seemed like in general she had a nasty personality. It might just be like Bill's the only person that, yeah, he might call her a bitch and stuff like that behind her back, but maybe he's treated her nicely, and like that I think speaks volumes that he's the one that she left everything to because she had no one else. So Bill's probably the closest person she really gotten to over time. Once again, we have no idea how long Bill was doing it, but she liked him enough despite him not liking her, because no one really liked her because she was kind of an asshole. So there was that element of it, which I thought was so interesting. They're like, yeah, she's a Saiyan. We won't have anyone say any bad words about her, even though you were literally moments ago calling her a bitch and a horrible person. I'm really curious what that terrible thing was that made her the way she is. I wonder, is that something we'll just never know, or will that secretly pop up plot-wise, and we're like, oh, we're bringing that around. So we'll see. But the other plot thread that, like I said, I was going to circle back to was the Emerson of it all. Him talking to Ward, trying to find out about the night, like when Maria like disappeared and or died, because he was at the bar here, and he's kind of like very like squirrely around that conversation. So it's like, right, apparently he was fairly sober at the time. There was one person he was told to talk, but he's like, yeah, I already talked to that person, so there's no luck. And he's like plying, Ward with alcohol, trying to like pump him for information. But also Ward's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna teach this kid, because he's kind of in that situation where like Emerson's like in that situation where like literally the only people in town that seem to like him is his Mal and Elvira. But either way, like I said, he was getting a little cagey around it, and it's like, oh, like I went home or whatever, and it's like, well, can anyone, corroborate that? And it's Elvira. It's like, oh, should I ask her? He's like, no, she was going through a rough time at the time, so do not bring that up because she doesn't remember much. Which this cuts into the scene of her in her car passed out, when she like, tried to overdose herself and die. But then like her dad goes to the trunk, and we cut away, but he's just staring at something in the trunk, which you're like, did she kill Maria and her dad covered it up type of situation? I wonder if that ends up, it feels like that's what that was, or what did he find back there? Maybe it wasn't, because she did say like the medication did make her feel numb, and the fact that she doesn't remember it, it does seem like it's something super traumatizing that she blocked out, and maybe that has something to do, if that might have been her first person. Once again, Maria might not have been a bad person, but that might have been her first real taste of killing. Like, she thought Sandy was like her first taste of blood, when in actuality he wasn't he the first person she killed? No, because that was the person that, and then afterwards she started looking for situations of, no, because the whole point was writing obituaries first based on like people's accident-prone situations, but that wasn't kind of doing it enough. So it's like, oh, I'm gonna expedite that and try and get my paychecks quickly, to turn around pretty quickly by setting up these deaths ahead of time. But anyway, that's an interesting plot thread, and that's why I go back. I referenced it earlier when I brought up Ward saying, am I a good father? And she's like, yeah, you made me. And he had that hesitation, like, what was the hell that was about? So I'm assuming that kind of correlates, because I'm pretty sure, yeah, that scene happened, I think that happened after everything with Emerson, after them talking to Emerson. I could be mistaken. So very, very interesting. Like I said, I think that means she has something to do with Maria's death, or maybe it's something else entirely, but it feels like it's something there. Like I said, he might have covered it up, and even Elvira doesn't remember. I mean, like, he was already a little bit, I think, of a drunk at the time, but because there's also the dodgy question of like, well, why'd you stop working? And he dances around that too, because he hasn't worked for a couple years, and like Maria's death was like a few years ago. It was like 5 years ago or something, right? So I think that might be the correlation. That might be why he kind of drinks, because it's like, right, you're my pride and joy, you're my everything, you're all I have left. But also maybe because he probably thinks nothing of it, of like, well, she did this bad thing, but doesn't have to define her entire life. Completely unaware that his daughter's doing all this, terrible stuff, killing people and making it look like suicide just so she can get paid, so it feels like that might be the direction this is going. We'll ultimately have to wait to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.